Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and people will be coming back in, but I'm going to go ahead and start with this question. And I will start with Terry Green. Councilor Vanessian asked about zero-based budgeting, and so you're first up.
I'm a big fan of that process. You know, it is an easy thing to build a budget when you start from the year before.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second. If you could, as part of your answer, give a brief description of zero-based budgeting.
Sure. Okay. Well, zero-based budgeting, for those that aren't familiar with it, is a process of budgeting where you start from zero and you say, okay, we have a police department, we have so many square miles we have to cover. The national average or the local average would be so many officers per square mile, or whatever the calculation is. You look at, you know, trends and that sort of thing, and you sort of decide, what do we need? Not historically what we've spent, but what do we really need based on maybe local averages or national averages or something like that. And you, instead of going off of what we've always done, you start from scratch and you say, let's just build it from the ground up and see what it would take to run a local government based on what we perceive our current needs to be. And it's a painful process to go through because you basically have to have each department sort of come to you with a proposal as to what they need and why they need it. And so it's not really an effective or a practical way to build a budget every year. Because it takes an enormous amount of effort and time to do that. However, I think that periodically, maybe every 8-10 years, it's a useful exercise. It sort of forces everyone to sort of step back and say, what are we doing here and why are we doing it? I've personally been advocating for that approach here at the school, and I think it's time for us to look at it not only in this environment but also in the town environment. I would support a zero-based budget process. If we haven't gone through it in a while, it's probably time.
Thank you. I'm just going to expand on that 1 second. The other type of budgeting that is currently done in most governments is you take last year's budget, you bring it back, you make adjustments, but you're always working off what you spent last year. And I think the complaint is from people that a lot of times it creeps upward and sometimes it rams upward quickly. So, Ms. Hayes, if you would follow up with that.
I absolutely agree. We have to do that. I said earlier that we needed to get our department heads together. We needed to go line by line. And starting from zero is the best way to do that. When we take a pay cut in ourselves, or something changes drastically in our own lives, we have to take a step back and look at what our spending habits are and where our money is going. We do it ourselves. Why shouldn't our town do that? And I think what would happen when we do that, again, I'm going to bring up salaries because I think that we have really lost our way with just the balance of where the money is going for salaries. It's just like this. It's not right. We have our hardworking police out there every day making a fraction of what our librarian makes. There is an issue with that. And the only way to make people take a look at that is by bringing it down to zero and making them justify. And that's what we should demand from our government, from our town, all the way up to the top. And so this is a great place to start for us. So I definitely think that we need to do that. I think it would open up a lot of eyes, and I think it should be done in public. I think that the public should have the opportunity to see what we're discussing, to see where your money is going. That's our tax money. That belongs to nobody but us. So we need to make sure, and if we have you as citizens there looking over our shoulder going, but how do you justify that? It's going to make everybody think smarter and make better decisions. So I definitely support it, and I really think that we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rivera?
I'm going to agree a little bit with what Terry Green and Tamara Hayes also said. It is a great check and balance system, and A budget does take time and effort every year, which is part of drawing up a budget. So as 8 to 10 years, that might be a little bit too long to go, especially when we are dealing with our own citizens on a very, very local level. They do need to be part of the process, maybe every year, but I'm thinking probably every 2 to 4 years put it together. I'm forced to balance my checkbook, and if I go over, I have penalties. And that doesn't seem to be the case with any government. They're spending our money sometimes on frivolous items, sometimes on necessities. So bringing in a zero balance and starting from scratch every few years, I think would get a good grasp on what the town is doing, get the town citizens involved so they can see where their money is going, and maybe that'll cut a majority of the frivolous expenses such as conferences and just small expenses for cell phones and cars and everything else that may not be necessary for our town, which is unique, of course, to others. Thank you.
Mr. Russell.
Well, first of all, I'm not even going to try and make you people think I know stuff about a budget. But I will agree with Ms. Bernician. Starting out at a zero-type budget every year, I believe is just basic 101 financing. And not only should we start the budget out from zero every year, that should include contracts like city manager, town lawyer. We should look at their contracts every year and change those accordingly. And her concept that she's talking about sounds a little bit like what I said earlier when it comes to the budget. I would be one that would be picking that budget apart, line by line, section by section, and you would have to judge the people that are trying to put that budget together and pass it. They're going to have to convince me that that is the right type of budget for this town. And right now, I don't think the budget we have is right because there's departments that I think are overinflated with money. There's bureaucrats in our town that are overinflated contracts. And some of the perks that are given to individuals in this town, you wouldn't believe what they are. But it's costing you people tax dollars. So yeah, I would thoroughly go for a zeroed budget every single year, and as far as time to put it together, I don't think that's a factor. You take as much time as you need to put together the best and the most economical and fairest budget that you can put together.
My mic now. Mr. Williams?
Well, very simply, I'm very much in favor of a zero-based budget because typically, if Dave referred to one other type of budget, and in commercial real estate, they have what is called the base year. So they start with some figure of expenses, rent, blah, blah, blah. I feel that you got to go back to zero when you start. You don't go back to what you spent the previous year or the previous year. You go to a zero basis. From that point on, each department then breaks down their expenditures as completely and as effectively as they can. You don't want to lump travel and entertainment in. You want to know where the travel is going to, what is the entertainment. You want to know exactly where the money is going. Because when you go to a little junket or a little conference, If it doesn't deal with the police, the library, the parks and rec, or the roads, and you're dealing with something other than that, if you're dealing with code enforcement from the United Nation, I mean, you're going way out of your realm. So you've got to pay attention to exactly what our priorities are. So a zero-based budget is so expensive, and it's so important to cut the deadwood out, the frivolous spending out, because we've looked through the budget, I've looked through the budget, we know where the budget goes. If you give money to one department, they're going to spend that money. If it's, they're just going to spend it. That's typical. They don't put it back into the general fund. They don't put it to another department. They just spend it. So what we need to do is to control that by a zero-based budget. It's very important.
Thank you. Earlier, we had another question down here. We still do. Ms. Vanessian's question chased out half our crowd. I hope that this doesn't cost us the rest.
Thank you. Given the perspective that our town manager makes tens of thousands of dollars more per year than our state governor, are you satisfied with his job performance? And please elaborate on your answer.
Once again, we're back to Terry Green.
Well, is this going? Okay. There's a bit of let me clarify a point here, and this is a point that we've heard a lot in this campaign, that the town manager makes more than the governor, and that's true. But there's a reason for that, and that is because the elected officials at both the state and the county level salaries are capped by statute. And so, for example, our county attorney, Brad Carline, earns significantly less than his chief deputy does. As a matter of fact, significantly less than a number of people in his office, because statutorily his salary is capped, whereas the ones who work for him are not. The governor's salary is capped. The town manager's salary, at least in our town and in most towns, is not. So the fact that he makes more than the governor is not surprising, because quite frankly, it is a difficult process to have salary caps lifted through statute. And the legislature can't even get their own salary raised. The last thing they're going to do is vote to raise other people's salaries as well. So it doesn't happen very often. If you are elected to one of those positions, that's something that you have to deal with. That being said, the question that I come back to is not the comparison between the town manager and the governor, because I don't think that's a valid comparison. What I do say is, for a town of the size that we have, with a $7.1-ish million budget, is $110,000 plus or $115,000 reasonable to manage a budget of that size, given contemporaries around the state? That's an answer that, quite honestly, I don't know yet. It's something that I would want to look at. If it is out of line, then I would say it bears to be corrected. But we also have to keep in mind that just like we want to keep our talented police officers and keep them from leaving to go to Sholo, if we set a salary that is below margin for that type of position and with that type of training, we are going to lose qualified candidates who may have experience in dealing with some of the dire issues that we need to deal with. And so I guess the answer to my question is, if we are in line with what people at that level make for a town of this size, then I support it. It's that simple. I don't think that anyone is saying that, well, there's probably some that would say that our town manager hasn't done a good job. Personally, from my perception, I think he has done a pretty good job. But to me, the separate issue is $115,000 too big for a town of $7 million budget? If it is, it needs to be reviewed. It's that simple. Thank you.
Before we continue, I'm going to add a small piece of information to that question, and that is the top management salary in the state is obviously Phoenix, and he makes $250,000, and you can imagine what his budget is. So that's just an additional piece of information. Ms. Hayes.
I took the time to do some research, and I found that the Arizona Journal did, just last year, they did do a study. And the study was based on all of the towns in Arizona. They compared town manager salaries. And what they found, that towns of our size, such as Snowflake, Taylor, the town managers were paid about $87,000 per year. That was the average salary. So we are quite a bit above that. I'm sorry, I lost my thought there. Do I think that the town manager is doing a good job? I have a couple of issues with our town manager. In 2010, our town was sued. I don't know how many people know that, but we had a lawsuit by the Attorney General's office. We were sued for antitrust procurement violations. Our town manager's office and our public works office were both named in that suit. We pled guilty. Our town manager pled guilty to that. We were given about $150,000 fine, which they did reduce down to $5,000, but that lawsuit cost us $5,000. But instead of being let go for that violation, our town council saw fit to renew his contract and give him a $15,000 a year raise at a time when we had also set in a wage freeze. I do blame the council for part of that because they're the ones who renewed his contract. At that same time in February, we also had our town planner get arrested. He was arrested for drunk driving and aggravated assault of a police officer. He was not terminated either. I see an issue with a lot of things getting pushed under the carpet, and we're all just kind of trying not to pay attention to what's happening. Those are egregious. That should not happen. We deserve better than that from our leaders. We have to be able to trust the people that are in control of our town and our money. And I don't feel that by letting those two things go on, that was in our best interest. So based on those two things for me, those are the two top ones for me that really bother me, having the town manager involved in the lawsuit and then having this other town person get arrested, found guilty, and not get fired. So that's where I feel that there's an issue. That is public record, just so you know. We have copies of the lawsuits, and I do have a copy of that arrest. So this is not something that is just a rumor that we just heard from somebody else. This is a fact. This happened. And the sad thing that I think is that every day, our police officer who was assaulted by that town planner got to see him at work and know that he made more money than him. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rivera?
Well, let's take a time to look over the town manager's responsibilities per Pinetop-Lakeside website. Execute general administrative supervision and control of the affairs of the town. Recently, there was a letter in the newspaper that was paraphrased from our current mayor asking restaurants to support the extension of the tax that we have for Woodland Park, but not for Woodland Park, for general fund. That wasn't supervised. We have, let's see, coordinate the administrative functions and operations of the various departments, boards, and services of the town. Well, while he may coordinate the functions and operations, there are departments in our town which are not being funded correctly or treated fairly. We have appoint, remove, suspend, promote, and demote appointed officers and employees of the town. Well, Tamara just brought up one of the town planner who actually has 2 felonies, and it looks like he still has his job. So there was no removal nor suspension or demotion of said employee. Exercise control over the town budget. Well, as we've all spoken about today, there is not very much control over our town budget. We currently have many overages, and those overages are being funded by other departments. And of course, that's how a budget works, but Do we really need to be going on what is considered a retreat for our town council members when it doesn't have to do directly with our own town, when it goes on to bigger and broader spectrum of codes and international affairs that have nothing to do with our town of 4,200 people? So as you can see, and that's just a few that I've listed from the 11 on here, it doesn't seem that our current town manager is exactly working for his money. There is an overage here in pay. He has been the consistent administrative personnel who has received a raise over the last few years, even though raises are not supposed to be given at this point. So right now, I'm not seeing where $115,000 is earned. I would want to seriously consider taking a look at that nice contract that he has and find out where things can be cut, even if that means positions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm moving on to the next question, and I'm going to apologize to the questioner. The answer is built into this question, so I'm just going to shorten it to, starting with Joe Russell, what are your opinions of centralized dispatch, which is currently on the table for the county?
Thanks.
That's the most I could do.
I have been reading some stuff on centralized dispatch. There's questions out there that I've heard that people are afraid they'll lose the 911 capability. They're also afraid that there might be some local jobs lost. They're kind of squabbling over where to put it. Do we want it in Holbrook? Do we want it possibly in Show Low? Or do we want it in Pinetop-Lakeside? I got to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know that much about this concept. What I do know is the packet I read, which was given to me courtesy of my wife. I've talked to her about this because she works for Lakeside Fire, and she is, involved in these. And right now, all that is going on, from what I can construe from talking with my wife and reading this document that I have, they're basically, you might say, they're in the fact-finding phase of whether or not a centralized dispatch is a good idea. And one of the things that I've heard mentioned by the Lakeside Fire Department chief is that they want to pursue this idea, and they want to get every conceivable question answered, ideas talked about, because if they go to it, they want to go to it in a very high quality manner, because once they go, if they do go to a centralized dispatch, I kind of understand that it's going to be hard to go back to something else if it doesn't work out. So in other words, they're not just trying to jump into this. They are really investigating it as thoroughly as they can. And when it comes to dispatching and radio, I know there's major problems up here. And I know exactly what, after being in the infantry for 17 years, and being out, I never was in combat, but I've gone out on tactical exercises, playing war, you might say. There is nothing worse than having lousy communications. You can get people killed because of bad communications. Let me give you an example of an experience that actually happened to me when I was in the Guard. They sent me and another guy in our tracked vehicle out to a position. We had all the radio frequencies. We had all the call signs. But some idiot officer but decided to change all that. And here this guy and myself are sitting out at Camp Roberts in the middle of summer, dying from, they were in an aluminum box, and I can't contact anybody to find out because what we were supposed to do didn't happen. And the only thing that got myself and my partner out of that situation, I heard my company commander come over the radio. I recognized his voice. So I came right out in plain English, which is a no-no in the military, and told him our problem. And he told us, where to go. So when it comes to communications with fire department, the police department, whatever, if they're not working right, that's the worst thing in the world. So I don't know if central dispatch is a good idea, but right now, as far as I know, they are only in the discussion phase, and and according to the police, the fire chief, nothing's going to happen until every I is dotted and every T is crossed before any decisions are made whether or not to go to a centralized dispatch.
Thank you. Everyone's thinking it, I have to ask it. Joe, was that company commander the last person to tell you where to go?
No, that person was last Tuesday night when I got home.
Okay. Just had to ask. Roger, if you have some thoughts?
I think so. I always have some thoughts.
Well, there you go.
Whether they're correct or not, I don't know. At this juncture, I'm not in favor of a centralized dispatch for a number of reasons. One is that I understand that if we go to centralized dispatch, Pinetop-Lakeside loses its 911. Now, I don't know about you, but this is a very important element to me and to my family and to my friends. I don't want to lose this feature. Secondly, we're going to have, I think, 6 or 8 dispatchers that will either have to go to Shola or Holbrook. So we lose 6 or 8 jobs. I never like to lose jobs. That's a big thing with me. I like to create jobs. I don't like to lose them. And I don't want to see these people have to travel to Holbrook in a snowstorm to try to work their job as a dispatcher. Another reason is the fact that when we went to privatize prison systems, everybody said, we're going to save so much money. We're going to save all this money, and it's going to be so great. Every time you privatize something, the next year what happens is we don't have enough money. We need more money. So the state legislature gives them more money. The same thing happens. They have a problem. Well, we don't have enough staff. We then have to increase that again. So we pay more money and more money. Right now, privatized prison systems are costing us so much more than if we kept the system we had. I think this is going to be the same thing. They're going to say, well, we don't have enough dispatchers. We got to hire more dispatchers, increasing the cost. And our $40,000 savings goes to a $400,000 loss. We need more dispatchers here because I've talked to some of the police officers, some of the dispatchers. We need more dispatchers to, control our town with dispatch. I think this is important because these people are overstaffed or overworked for their staffing assignments. One other thing with the centralized dispatch, besides losing the jobs, we're creating, could be a problem in the future as far as location for the police department. It's my understanding we have like 5 fires in Pinetop-Lakeside every quarter. Now, I know for a fact that the police are dispatched numerous times on a daily basis for different things. Burglar alarms, things of this nature. False alarms at my business, which had a few, just a couple. Anyway, but they're dispatched. And if the fire department is concerned about this because there was almost a collision between two helicopters that were dispatched by different entities. Right now, if you're a pilot and you know this, now the helicopters as dispatched are communicating. So this problem is not going to occur like it occurred south of Flagstaff when the two helicopters collided. And the two helicopters that collided over Phoenix, Steel Park. They've made these adjustments with the Federal Aviation Administration. So this is not going to occur again. So by using this horrendous possibility that almost happened, they're scaring us into a centralized dispatch. But I think the loss of jobs, the loss of 911, I think are major components to not be in favor of this at this time. And the cost saving is going to be negated after the first year when they ask for increased budget.
Okay, are there any questions from the crowd? Yes, apparently one. At least one. I know what's on his, you have one already up here? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to budgets, and having worked different jobs throughout my whole life and having several different careers, if you will, I've worked in major projects where I had budgets. And budgets are funny because what happens when you have a budget, when you have so many layers up above you, they want you to spend your whole budget. Because the next year they're afraid that if you don't spend your whole budget, you don't get your budget again. So my question to you, what will you do to keep that from happening? Because budgets should be meant to be broken, not risen up. You know, if somebody brings a project in, like I brought projects in, I was over some $1 million projects. I brought them in under budget. You know, I got chewed out because I didn't spend all the money because all of a sudden the accountants didn't know what to do with that because it didn't hit their concept because all they know is spending. So I guess my question is, if you've got a Parks and Recs, they have a project and they bring it in, and they bring it in under budget, what you need to do is reward them for bringing it in under budget somehow. And that's with all. And how would you guys approach that?
With all due respect, that's been asked and answered, and the candidate's answer was that they would use zero-based budgeting. I believe they were all in agreement on that, so that you don't have carryover from the previous year. So I'm going to move on to Mr. Beck's question.
I'm going to ask a little different type of question, but I think, in my opinion, it might be the most important question of the evening. Town councils around the country are being petitioned by their constituents to order their police departments not to obey any directives from any source that would violate their oath of office to protect and defend the United States Constitution. As a council member also required to take the oath, would you support such a measure?
We're at Terry Green right now.
So that I can clarify your question, are you referring to would we support such a directive to the police or to us individually as members of the council? Okay. I understand that, I believe the root of your question came from some agencies that had internal policies where they would instruct their officers to perhaps give more enforcement to some laws and perhaps turn a blind eye to others. Is that where this is coming from?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
We hear about the Patriot Act, we hear about the National Defense Authorization Act, both which takes away our Bill of Rights, and you guys take an oath of office, and so does the police, to defend their position. If there was a directive, for instance, from Washington, that
head that instructed, local municipalities to enforce these Patriot Act, National Defense, Second Amendment. Would you, as a council person, instruct your police officers, because you took an oath of office to defend the Constitution and not violate it, would you instruct your police officers to follow the Constitution and not obey the order coming down, let's say, from Washington or somewhere else?
Well, I don't know if I can answer your question directly, but I will give you my general thoughts on the matter. Number one, to go to the specifics of your question, I wouldn't instruct my police officers to do anything because I would defer to their professional judgment when it comes to enforcement. However, as a policy-making body, I believe it's our job to interpret our duties to the Constitution in light of restrictions or conditions that may be placed on us by laws that are recognized to be of higher level. For example, you all may have heard the term preemption. Where if there's a conflict between state law and federal law and the courts have decided the issue, and if they decide in favor of the federal law, then the federal law wins. It's called preemption. If it is an issue that has been decided by a legitimate court, then I would have no option but to support that decision even if I personally didn't agree with it. Because I believe in the constitutional system of government that we use in this country. I wouldn't take it upon myself to selectively choose which legitimately decided laws I wanted to respect or not. I would respect a law that was legitimately decided by the courts. However, if the question wasn't decided by the courts at that point, then I would follow my own particular conscience when it would come to something like that. And I, in spite of my views on alternative forms of revenue, I'm a fairly conservative person when it comes to constitutional principles. And I believe that less is more when it comes to that issue. So in general, without, I guess, getting into specific examples, I would say that if it is an undecided issue that the courts have not yet ruled on, I would always defer to a rather strict reading of the Constitution and of its amendments. I support personal and individual rights and freedoms, but I don't do so at the expense of violating what I might disagree with in terms of what decided law has been.
Clarification. Mr. Beck, your question implies that the council directly run the police department. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, they have taken an oath of office to defend the Constitution.
Who, the police?
No, the council.
Council.
Everybody in government does.
But if the council then directs police officers to do anything, are you suggesting that they should step in and directly run the police department?
I'm just suggesting that...
It's a yes or no question.
I'm suggesting that they defend and protect the Constitution as when they took their oath, they do that. However that's determined, that's the bottom line. They took an oath, they have to defend that oath, or they shouldn't have taken the oath. So they have to honor that oath. It's very sacred and precious to individual freedoms and liberties. And when we see out of Washington...
Okay, that's no longer a question. Let's move on. Is there another question from the floor? Anyone?
I'd like to actually answer that question.
Oh, okay, Ms. Hayes would like to attack
I would
that.
actually like to answer that. I think we're seeing a trend across the country, and especially with our administration right now, that our rights and liberties, our freedoms, are being slowly taken away from us. I support the Constitution. Our police officers support the Constitution. If they come to me and they say, we were told to take your guns away, we're not doing it, I would support them. Because they're following the Constitution, they're following the oath of office that they took. I don't direct them. I can't make them go out and take guns away. I can say, yes, I support you, or no, I don't support you. But I think when it's in direct conflict with our Bill of Rights and with our Constitution, that we as citizens need to stand up and not just take it. We have to support ourselves. We have to defend ourselves. Our police are here to defend us. That's what they do. And if they come and say, I'm not going to follow that directive because it violates the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, I'm going to stand up for them, and I will back them 1,000%. Thank you.
Dave? Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to elaborate on that. All you guys know I'm a police officer. I work for the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. On that patch, it says Pinetop-Lakeside. Doesn't say the federal government. The only reason why we exist here in this town because you people want us here. And our job is to defend each individual's freedom and protect their constitutional rights. That's why we are here. And all of us, all of the members of the police department or the police officer association that follows under, we are here for you. We don't follow any executive orders that violates the Constitution of the United States by any president. So we're here for you guys.
Hi, Chris Ritter, resident Lakeside my whole life. I got lots of issues with this town.
Could you speak more directly into the mic?
Yeah, you guys are not on the council, so I can't blame you, okay? But in 46 years, there has been nothing improved in this town as far as I'm concerned.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. The current council has gone out of their way, even years back, have gone out of their way to either run businesses off or punish them however they can. There's absolutely zero enticement for new businesses to come here, and when there are, they run them off. There's nothing here long-term for our kids to come back to. You cannot count on tourism 100%. Can't do it.
Is there a question?
Yeah, I want to know what they're going to do to entice business, to support local business, and give business owners such as me who live in these county pockets a right to vote. Even though we don't live in the city limits, we own and operate legitimate businesses in the city limit, and we don't have a vote. And I say that if you own and operate a business in this town, regardless of where you live, you ought to have a vote. And I'd like to know what you guys would be willing to do. Because I know a lot of business owners in this town, and they don't have a say, because they live a half a mile into the county.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the candidates to help me out with this. I know one of you has suggested annexing some of the pockets. Mr. Green, could you talk about that, and then I'll let anybody else who would like to comment on that also.
Just very briefly.
And explain the whole voting thing, because that...
Yeah, we in this town, were incorporated, 28-ish years ago. Because of the process of getting the town incorporated, there had to have been some pockets excluded in order to make it all work, and so we ended up with this hodgepodge of county islands that we now have. Many of the residents of those county islands feel that they are, in fact, members of our community, and they are. But because of the political boundaries that were drawn at that time, legally, they're not. And so we have this mix of police coverage versus sheriff. We have this mix of county versus city road repair. We have issues like this where we have town residents operating businesses but are living in county islands. My proposal is to work as hard as we can and as proactively as we can to bring the county islands, or as many of them that are willing to come into the town boundaries, so that we can avoid these issues. And we take our tiny little 4,200 population and we make it bigger. And by that, we gain clout as a town, and not to mention the fact that it's more fair for everybody who benefits from the city services to have a say in how those monies are spent. So that's been a proposal of mine, and I'll sit down.
Thank you. Do any of the rest of you want to volunteer to tackle that question? Mr. Russell.
Well, as I said earlier, if I'm on the town council, I would like the county people to come so I can hear their opinions, their complaints. And that could help me to determine how I'm going to vote on something. Now, as Mr. Green alluded to, the big problem is the fact, you live in the county, so you can't vote in city politics. But as far as I'm concerned, your opinions make a difference. The only way that that issue can be settled is by annexation. I don't foresee that ever happening because right now, well, even back when the town was trying to annex all the business of Wagon Wheel, our town government has nothing to offer you people in the county to entice you to become part of the town. Like it was stated by Mayor Vicario when they were trying to do the annexation in Wagon Wheel. One of the residents of Wagon Wheel asked him, well, we've got police protection, our roads are taken care of, and, what have you got to offer us to come in? And his answer was, well, you can participate in our city government. And the city government at that time, to this time, I don't think is much of an incentive. But I really, I know what you're getting at. I know how you feel. And the only way it can be solved would be to annex these county deals. And I can't see that happening because there is nothing in our town as far as entities and amenities that we could offer the county people to make it worth their while to come into the town. So it's almost like a catch-22. And I don't know if it's been approved or not, but the council has been reworking the sign ordinance, and one of the provisions in the rework was the possibility of allowing businessmen that have businesses in the county area to allow them to put portable A-frame signs in the city limits to advertise their businesses. That could help, and it might not. But the real answer actually is annexation. But like I said, I can't see the people living in the county areas coming into our town because our town has nothing to offer that really, would make it worthwhile. But who knows?
Thank you, Joe.
It could change.
Thank you. That, of course, begs the question of why you want to run for council. But Mr. Williams, you're up next.
Great question. I've been to 27 businesses talking to business owners. Probably half of them live in the county. And they have no vote. They have no voice. And to be real honest with you, I've had a business up here since 1993. We have 2 businesses now. I've never had a councilman. Wait, I did have you come in my store. I've never had a councilman except Dara. I've never had a mayor. I've never had a town manager. I've never had a town employee come in and say, hey, Roger, what can we do to help your business? I've never had that asked to me. And, we are the ones that generate the revenue to pay them, and we have no help from the government. We have no help from our town council. They've never asked that question. They've never been involved in our community. An interesting thing, a couple of years ago, I had one of the enforcement, I served my country, and my wife's father was one of the first on Omaha Beach. We put out, I think we had 4 American flags out. The town enforcement man, at that time, came out and said, hey, you got too many American flags out. You need to take them down, and you can only have 1 up. Well, he got quite a, win from both of us. And we kept them up. I didn't care. So we got to help the businesses, and we've got to have some way where the business owners who are living in the county have a voice, and they have something to say. But I think we need a council that is respondent to our small businesses. And they're not. I mean, be real honest with you, they're not. They really don't support small businesses. They don't ever ask the question how we can help. So this is a big thing with us because we're the ones that pay the freight, and it's not being, coddled, and we're not being supported. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Roger. Mr. Reynolds? We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it.
You want me to wait? Go ahead. I can ask you while it's on.
Sure, go ahead.
You probably had the best question of the night because we are not a business-friendly town. Our impact fees are too high. We do chase people off. We've had many opportunities to have businesses here that go to Show Low. And we're not talking big businesses, we're talking CVS Pharmacy. They didn't stay here, they went to Show Low. They were looking here. Nobody can exactly tell me why they went to Show Low. I've asked, but nobody can tell me why. The best way that we can even look to annex the county areas is by making it attractive. There are ways we can do that. We can get rid of the impact fees. We do not have to charge those businesses impact fees. We don't have to charge them taxes. We can give them 3 years amnesty from the taxes and then slowly work them into the taxes. That way when they start generating revenue for us, they don't feel like it hit them all at once. And that's the whole point. We want them here. We want them part of our town. So if we give a little now, we make a lot more later. And so that's really important to think about is what kind of incentives can we give to businesses who want to come here? We don't want to make it hard. Right now, all we're looking at is, I want your money, I want it now, and if you're not willing to just work with us, go away. We don't want you. And that's not the atmosphere we want. So what can we do? Like I said, we can lower impact fees. We can get rid of taxes for a while. We can try to bring them into the fold and get them in. We can make them part of our advertising. We can move our signs down. We can make them feel part of the town. That's what we need to do. They basically are part of the town. The benefits that we give them when we cut those taxes and we start putting them in our businesses and in with our promotions is that we do promote their business for them. It's a win-win when you make it so they can win. So as far as going after new businesses, I've talked about this before, so some of you have heard it, so I'm really sorry, but for those who haven't, there are some things that are happening in our country right now. Businesses, large companies that have call centers and tech centers were moving offshore. And when they moved offshore, they were sending their call centers away. Well, they've decided to come back, and they're calling it inshoring, and what they're doing is they're coming to small-town America because they've realized that in our rural communities, the cost of doing business is much lower, and that they can afford to hire people at regular wages instead of the overblown wages they have to pay in a big city. So it's a win-win for us because what they do is they infill our businesses that are sitting empty. All those business offices that are sitting empty right now, we can fill those. There are companies doing that, actively doing that right now. But it takes people that are committed to make the phone calls and go after the business. You can't just sit back and hope they go, that Pinetop-Lakeside looks like a pretty nice place. They don't do that. You have to be proactive. Everything that we do for our town needs to be proactive, and we're not. We just expect it to happen. Show Low, they're proactive. They're growing. Now, do we want to be big and have box stores? Like I said earlier, no. But smaller to mid-sized businesses that are non-competing to our existing businesses that bring people here, it fixes a lot of the problems that we're having in our economy right now. Because as people move into town, it brings more property taxes in. It puts more kids in the school. When kids are in school, we get paid. The school gets paid for that. Right now, Blue Ridge, the high school is in trouble. I mean, the whole school district is in trouble. And the town can help with that, and we're not. We are falling down. So there are things that we can do, but we have to be proactive, and we have to be able to give a little in the beginning to be able to reap the benefits in the end. Thank you.
Ms. Rivera, did you want to attack that?
Yes,
Apparently.
mine will be brief. Even though right now you don't have the ability to vote because you are in a county island or a county area, I want you and everybody else in the county to know that just because you right now are not able to vote, that doesn't mean you don't have a voice. And that you do need to come to town council meetings and talk to town council members and express those concerns and those ideas, because they are here for you. And that's the biggest part of having a town council is you are Pinetop-Lakeside, and your voice amongst everybody else is a big voice. And if we can get everybody to come together and bring that to this town, we will be able to flow and function, I think, in a much smoother way.
Thank you.
you can tell your
Mr. Reynolds, I'm going to have three people answer Mr. Reynolds' question, and then I have a question here. We're going to have a couple more answer, and then I hear my mommy calling.
I've never been much one to go along to get along. There are no buts when it comes to the Constitution. Check the word nullification to go with your preemption word. Yeah, I'm a big fan of very minimal involvement of the government in my life. I want to know, and this is completely off subject of what everybody else has been talking about. If there were a regional disaster here, whether it be wildfire, chemical spill, nuclear disaster, whatever the case may be, I know what the current plan says on what is to be done with our school children. I want to know what your idea is as far as when this happens and there's an evacuation, does that include the parents being able to get their kids? And I know what the current plan says, but I want to know if it includes, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Does it include the parents being able to pick the kids up?
I'm going to ask for three volunteers from the candidates to answer that question. Okay, Mr. Green.
The plans that we use for school evacuation are not designed by us in a vacuum. They are designed in consultation with other schools in the area, other schools around the state, other schools around the country. We consult very closely with local law enforcement as well. I believe what you're referring to is the fact that if the school had to be evacuated for some reason, the kids would be removed to some sort of a central location where at that point they could be reunited with their families. Is that the understanding that you have? There are legitimate reasons for that. If there is a disaster happening at the school and there's 800 cars trying to get on campus to pick kids up, it would create an unworkable situation for law enforcement to deal with whatever situations might be happening on campus. I support the plan that is endorsed by law enforcement. It's that simple. I think it is built with the wisdom of experts, of which I am not one, to make it most efficient for us to deal with the situation and allow parents to have access to their kids as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Do we have another? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next question. When you get into office and find out it's much tougher fixing the budget than you thought, are you going to stick with it, stay motivated and keep working, or give up and keep the status quo?
Go ahead again.
Start with Ms. Hayes.
Can you roll that again?
Yeah. Essentially, the question is, when you get into office and fixing a budget becomes tougher than what you think it is sitting here, are you going to stay with it or go back to the type of budgeting that's in existence now?
I'm just going to say giving up for me is not an option. If we set up a plan and we start it, we're finishing it. That's all I have to say
Thank
about
you.
that. Thanks.
Ms. Rivera? One last question. Okay, sorry.
Well, the answer is just as simple as Tamara's. And it is that if we decide together that we are going to sit down and put together a budget, whether it takes hours, overnight, whatever needs to be done, we do need to finish it. As it's not just important to us, it's important to all of our departments, all of the people in our town, that we stick together and we put this together because this affects everybody, not just in short term, but in the long run.
Thank you. Mr. Russell?
If I had that kind of idea, I wouldn't even be up here. Whatever problems I have to face as a city council member, I will work to solve that problem no matter how long it takes. And no matter whose toes I've got to step on to get something done right, I'll do it. I mean, there was a few years back, there was a push by our city manager to make Jack Barker a full-time attorney. Well, it just so happened that day earlier at my business that I had to close, I was going through the code book. And I found information in there that talks about the city council. I found stuff for the city manager, the magistrate, planning and zoning. You know, these are job descriptions. What I didn't find was anything for a town attorney. But yet, they're trying to, Udall is trying to push this through. So I went to the council meeting that night, and when it come time for that agenda, I spoke on it. And of course, I took the code book with me. Most of the people on the council didn't like seeing me show up with a code book tucked under my arm, but I did. And I told them, you need to stop this right now. And I told them why. And I thought our manager was going to have a heart attack. And they didn't go through with it. In fact, Mayor Teague, who was here earlier, she ordered the town manager to put something together as far as a job description for a town attorney. So like I say, you know, if somebody's trying to do something that's not right, and I don't feel it's not right, I'll move heaven and earth to try and get it done right. So yeah, if I run into problems with the budget, I'll stick with it until it gets settled. I won't just tuck my tail between my leg and go home.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
You know, you asked an interesting question. I didn't quite know how to answer. I know Terry could answer it better because there is a catastrophe plan in the school systems. But, you know, one of the thoughts I had when you asked that question is the fact that I've been involved with youth at risk for a lot of years in the Phoenix area. And the big element of the kids that were in problems were that they didn't have anything to do. They didn't have any counseling. You know, they would then make their own way, so to speak, and they became youth at risk. Now, I haven't cleared this with the police officers or anything like that because I think it's very important to have a police officer in our school system. You know, it can be controversial to some, not controversial to others. But what I experienced with the police officers was actually another counselor for the kids. In fact, when I was teaching and we had a police officer assistant to youth program, we had more kids go to the police officer than we had go to the counselors. And I thought this was a great program. And I'm big on having police involvement with our businesses. We don't want them to pull up in squad cars, but, notify us beforehand. But I think it's very important to everybody be on a first-name basis with the business people, the police officers, because, we need your support, we need your help. And the same thing with the kids, so I think that's very important. So I'm just spinning off what you said. My concern is for those kids, and I would really like to see a police involvement in both of the schools. We only have 2 of them, so I think that's important. Now, get back to the other question.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, you're not.
I digress. What the heck. The budget's so important. I mean, the budget is how we control our government. So if we have to make those tough decisions by a zero-based budget, we've got to do that. Otherwise, we cannot run a city. It's like, your wife, if she has a checkbook and she thinks that she has more checks in her checkbook, she has more money in the account. I mean, it's the same way the government functions. So I think the budget is very important. You have to make those tough decisions, and you have to cut the wastefulness.
Thank you. Following the thought of that last question, I'd like to close with some advice for our candidates. And that is a statement once attributed to Michael Jordan. If you accept the expectations of others, especially the negative ones, then you never will change the outcome. So keep that in mind as you continue your run for office, and good luck. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I'd like to thank the candidates for showing up, and I'd like to thank the Police Officers Association for staging this. I know it was a lot of work. So, Officer Overton, thank
you. Thank you. Can you give another hand today? Oh, thanks. This is closing. If we have to go off record, and keep being here all night, did everybody's question right now, do you guys feel comfortable? You asked what you can ask. Council? Okay, Councilwoman Venezian. Speak loud.
Okay, my question is that we are involved with the Arizona Leagues of Cities and Towns. We are also involved with the International Mayors or Town Managers Association, as well as the International Association for Town Clerks and so on and so forth. And we spend tens of thousands of dollars in fees and conferences and so on to go to these conferences or to go to these events. And many times, these are lobbying organizations, by the way, that infringe upon personal and individual rights. And we see this over and over again, and there's many towns throughout the nation that have withdrawn from these organizations. Phoenix was one of them, and it saved Phoenix $500,000 a year to withdraw from this organization. I want to know what your thoughts are in our town being involved in these organizations and what you'd like to do about it.
Yeah, just real quick.
All right. I don't pretend to know the inner workings of the Arizona League of Cities and Towns. I've never worked with it personally. To the extent that it can provide training to city managers and council members, especially new ones, training that's relevant to what they are doing here in Pinetop, there may be value in belonging to those kinds of organizations. Like I said, I don't really know what kind of curriculum or training they offer. I do have some personal opinions on going to these kinds of 4-day events where they spend $220 a night on hotel rooms at these 5-star resorts in the valley and do this. Personally, when I go to events like that, I stay at the Days Inn next door and pay $50 a night and, still get the same value out of the training and save, usually it's my own money. But the point is that we can get these training events done at a lot less cost to the town if we're just a little more careful about how we do it. I can't really answer your question on whether I would support withdrawal from the organization because, quite honestly, I don't know enough about their politics and their agenda to be able to say. I wouldn't rule the idea out, though.
I would withdraw. Plain and simple. Anything that infringes or takes away personal liberties and rights is not something that we need to be a part of for our town. We're all about life and living and personal freedoms here. And to belong to something, especially when we're having the budget issues that we have now, it just doesn't seem wise to be spending money that way. We have codes in place. We don't need international codes. We don't need to be told what kind of light bulbs we use and what kind of outlets we put in our houses. We have codes for that protect us and keep us safe. We don't have to have somebody tell us what to do. We can do that. I just think it's a waste of money, and like Mr. Green said, we spend a lot of money at these events on hotels, travel, everything, and it's just not something that we need. Our town managers can go to trainings that are not international trainings. There are trainings offered all through the state that they can go to learn how to become a town manager. And our town managers and our people have already been trained. So I just see it as a waste of money. And again, I'm just not for anything that takes away personal liberties or freedoms.
Yes, I do agree with Tamara Hayes. Yes, ditto.
I am thoroughly against all these conferences and what have you. When I was on planning and zoning, I went to a conference down in Glendale over by the whatever professional football team Arizona has. It was in that area. And I carpooled, I shared a room, so you know. I learned nothing. Every one of the classes I attended had nothing to do with small town USA. Nothing. So why am I there? Our community director was there. I never laid eyes on him until it was time to eat. Some of the things that this conference supposedly offered was golf packages during the day. Take a tour of the nuclear power station that's down there. I thought we were down there to supposedly learn something that we could take back to our towns to make our towns better. Personally, I feel there's enough people in this town, smart people, that if you put them together, they can come up with some great ideas and maybe some answers. I'll give you an example. I was on the Open Space Committee. We were trying to figure out what the heck is open space. So being I'm an avid reader, they gave me the job of pulling every single piece of paper I could find in any publication what open space was. Sue Sitko, I believe John Jericho, and I believe Norris Dodd. You should have seen the report and the package that those three individuals put together from the information that I got them about open space and then other information that they got about trails and stuff. It was as good as any professional, in my opinion, could put together. So, bottom line is, I don't think we need to go to this stuff. We want to have a retreat or a conference. Let's stay home. Let's invite our people to these retreats and conference. And also let them speak at these retreats and conferences here locally. And if we put our heads together, we can probably solve a lot of problems in this town without spending I know one conference that was done, this town spent over $60,000. That's what it costs you taxpayers for that conference. $60,000. That could have gone towards the police or could have gone in the pot for trying to get Woodland Lake Park. So no, conferences and all that stuff and these leagues and stuff, no. Like I said earlier, I don't even think Adam Promo is doing a good job for this town, and I don't know how much money they've got.
a lot of these leagues I've looked into are attacks on our personal property rights. And the zoning codes that are coming down from the United Nations, which we all love and adore, are attacks on our personal property rights. It's designed more for a town like New Delhi or Singapore or Beijing, not Pinetop-Lakeside. So to spend money to go on these little junkets is ridiculous because it doesn't benefit the police, it doesn't benefit our roads, it doesn't benefit our library, and it doesn't benefit our parks. And we're spending thousands of dollars doing this. This is utterly ridiculous. Just one other thing. We spent $125 plus expenses for Rick Counts to do a general plan for Pinetop Lakes. Well, that money, I mean, we have such bright people in our community that on a weekend, probably a case of beer, we could have come up with a better general plan than we voted down. And it was ridiculous. I mean, the intelligent factor of our community with the retired people, we've got retired judges, retired attorneys, retired police officers, retired military. We've got such bright people in this community, yet our council and city manager farmed this out, costing it ended up probably over $150,000. Now, if you take, and take this money out, we could have had, I know John would have volunteered pro bono. A lot of these other people would have volunteered, Jim would have. I know these people would have volunteered pro bono, and Rob would have for sure. Maybe Rob would want to get paid, but I'm not sure. But we've got, take advantage of our people, take advantage of our intelligence and intellect. Don't farm it off to Rick Counts out of Phoenix. That was ridiculous. And we voted it down for maybe that reason. But did that answer your question? Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Roger. Is there anything else? Yes, ma'am? Sure.
4.
Yeah, there's 4, but...
There are 4 spaces.
So,
well, you can vote early and vote often like they do in Chicago.
Is there... Okay.
Brief, right?
Brief comment? Did everybody's questions get answered they want to ask tonight? I just want to make sure of that first. Anybody? Okay.
I just want to set the record straight. I don't want to belabor the issue, but the total that the town manager makes in Pinetop-Lakeside, including deferred compensation, is $126,184.92 a year, just for your information. The other thing I wanted to say is, and we appreciate the Police Association hosting this event, but the People's Vision Committee decided and knew that we wanted to have, we were going to host this event originally. And we're very sorry that Vice Mayor Stephanie Irwin is not here or Councilman Kim Webb is not here. But when we were going to host the, this forum, we asked those candidates to come, and Vice Mayor Irwin said, I can't make it on that date. So we said, we'll change the date for you because it's important that you're here and the voters hear from you. And her response was that the town is having a candidates forum. I'm going to attend that forum. I'm not going to attend another forum. That was her response. And also at that last forum, Councilman Webb made the statement that he votes his constituents' wishes rather than his conscience. Yet, when one studies his voting record, mostly everything he voted for is against what the people wanted. So I just wanted to get those things out. I think we got a great bunch of candidates up here to vote from. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The final closing, I would like to say thanks for everyone coming out. Thank you for letting us host this forum. It's an honor. We would really appreciate it. Anything you need from the Police Officer Association, we'd be more than happy to help the community out on. Now, I'm just asking, y'all showed up, there was more people that showed up. You heard their answers. If they get elected on the city council, I hope you guys are in the city council chambers and hold them to their answers. And not just a couple people, like an individual in this room show up and the editor of the paper, the only one in the city council chambers, but I just hope everybody shows up and holds these candidates to what they say, and it's true. And thank you. And I'd like to give a round of applause to the 5 candidates. Thank you for coming.